future. Can I request everybody to please mute so that we have less static? Thank you so much. So it's a great pleasure to welcome you for today's event. This is a pre-event to the World Sustainable Development Summit and is a result of a partnership between TERI and the South Asia Women in Energy, or SAVI, which is a joint initiative of Usaid and USISPF. We're really fortunate to have leading experts to talk about gender-inclusive sustainable development and expanding participation of new age women leaders today. I'm sure you all must be really excited to hear them. So we'll just quickly get on with it. But before we do, I would like to request all our speakers and experts and panel members and guests to please put on your camera so that we can quickly take a group photo, do a quick photo op. So can I request everybody, please? And I would request, great. Great, I see many of you, and it's great to see all of you. Okay, I'll give 2 minutes for Soma to switch on. Anuradha, Mini, Tushar, Ritu. So I'll give 2 minutes and then I'll ask, go ahead. Great to see all the brilliant smiles and happy faces here. So great. Okay. Did we capture it?
Yes, we did.
Okay, great. So thank you so much. And I would request everybody to be on mute, so just that the other speakers do not have an issue. And I would also request everybody who is speaking to please turn on your videos, because we would like to see you as you speak. So that would be great. Without further ado, let me invite our first speaker for the evening, Dr. Annapurna Vancheshwaran, who is the Senior Director, Communication and Outreach at TERI. She has been coordinating TERI's WDS event since its inception, and I'm really delighted to call upon her for the welcome remarks. So over to you, Annapurna.
Thank you so much, Monali. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm not a speaker, but I'm here to welcome you all on behalf of TERI, the USAID, the US-India Strategic Partnership Forum, which is called the USISPF, and SAVI, which is the South Asia Women in Energy. A very warm welcome to you all on what we consider a timely and important theme. As Monali said, Women on the Rise, Redefining Our Common Future. Today's deliberations are part of TERI's mega endeavor, widely known as the World Sustainable Development Summit. The summit is the annual flagship event of the Institute. In February 2021, the summit series will mark 20 years in its journey in making sustainable development a globally shared goal. The 2021 edition of the summit will be held virtually from the 10th to the 12th of February under the broad theme, Redefining Our Common Future, Safe and Secure Environment for All. The discussions at the summit will attempt to explore the close interlinkages that we see emerging between climate change and health. As we all know, within these discussions, women play a central role, particularly when we view the socio-economic and health impacts. Hence, we have planned some of these dedicated sessions from now to the summit. We are absolutely delighted that with the support of USAID, USISPF, and SAVI, we have been able to put together this discussion leading to the summit in February 2021. I will also like to acknowledge and thank all the colleagues from these three organizations, USAID, USISPF, SAVI, and including all my colleagues in TERI for working as a team in putting together this event, and do look forward to today's discussions being amplified at the WSDS platform and beyond. Before I hand over to Monali once again, I welcome you all and look forward to this evening's proceedings.
Thank you so much, Annapurna. And yes, this has been a great partnership, and we are looking to the main event now. So I'll now like to request our next speaker, a senior women leader in the sector, Ms. Vaishali Nigam Sinha. Vaishali is a practitioner and advocate of sustainability and gender empowerment ideals. Currently, she is serving as the Chief CSR Sustainability and Communication Officer of Renew Power And we are also very fortunate to have her as a chair of SAVI. So over to you, Vaishali. Vaishali, you're on mute. So.
It's a big problem. Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me here today on this very special session. And thank you to all the partners for curating this session. I think it's a very important session and a very important message that women are actually at the heart of this whole energy transition we are seeing unfold before us. So well done, all of you. Dr. Respected Shri Daya Shankarji, Dr. Mathur, Mr. Ragi, Ms. Hamzawi, and Dr. Vancheshwaran. Such a pleasure to be here with you. I'm honored, and I must thank. Also, I want to say that during these very challenging, well done on putting this together. We are all here today to discuss this very important topic, and we couldn't have chosen a better time for it. 2020 has been a very difficult year for many. And I must congratulate all of us for breezing through it with so much of, courage and resilience and continuing life as normal. And, it takes a lot. The scale and intensity of COVID has been a setback, but yet it's taught us and shown to us, our abilities and what we can do in the most challenging circumstances. So I just feel we've all learned so much from it. And we all accelerate our journey towards achieving a lot of the goals we've set for ourselves, right? So if there could be a silver lining to this pandemic, it is perhaps that this calamity has also reinforced the need for reestablishing a sustainable, resilient, and an inclusive socio-economic order. And there is a global consensus that green has been at the. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes,
Hello?
yes, we can. We can hear you, Vaishali. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I think my computer just froze for a second. And so, we are right at the center of this transition. And, as we recover from COVID and, move ahead in this direction, I just want to say that, we have to recognize that women have really taken the brunt of, the whole sort of, pandemic. And we've just, kind of learned that there's so much more to be done as far as the agenda for women is concerned when it comes to the recovery. So let's keep that in the center of all of this as we move ahead. Also, I wanted to point out that when it comes to this energy transition, we all know that there is there is a lot of first-hand experience which a lot of the women have, but often they don't necessarily get incorporated in any of the policy making, any of the decision making, and there is there's a lot to do with respect to ensuring that we engage the case of women and include them in this whole transition which is unfolding before us. So whether it is in rural India, whether it is in urban India, we can contribute extensively. We have not been involved so far as much as we should, but it's also on the positive side. It's great to see many women leaders taking lead. We have women who are working across the world in this field, in developing economies, and also we've seen women leaders who've led very successfully during COVID times. So there are also a lot of positive case studies. And, as we march ahead, it's important that we don't lose sight of what we've achieved and what, where there are gaps which need to be addressed. So really need to ensure that we take stock of the wins and the misses as we move forward. I think the whole sector is transitioning very fast. There are lots of opportunities for women as far as academia is concerned, industry academia partnership, research and development, entrepreneurship, and platforms who are here present today. Whether it is USISPF, whether it is, Savi, Terry, we can all become conduits to bring together people, ideas and opportunities and ensure that women really do stay at the center of it. We really need to work towards a world where there's greater equity, of course, which further leads to parity, but hugely important for us to keep engaging women so that as we, move ahead, we are moving ahead more inclusively. So I'll stop here and perhaps can come back later. But I think these are some of the important points I wanted to put forward as we start.
Thank you so much, Vaishali. As always, really appreciate your, inputs and insights. So we will now move on to our next speaker, Mr. Mukesh Aghi. Mr. Mukesh Aghi is the President and Chief Executive Officer of USISPF. He has an extensive experience of working with business and government leaders in US and India to promote trade and strengthen ties between the two countries. So I'm really delighted to invite Dr. Mukesh Aghi for making his special remarks. So over to you, Dr. Mukesh. We're not able to hear you, sir. Maybe till I guess what we will do is ask our organizers to sort out the issues with the audio with Dr. Mukesh, and we can, in the meantime, go to our next speaker, Ramona. Ms. Ramona Hamzawi, Acting Mission Director of Usaid India. Ramona is a career member of the US Senior Foreign Services and has been with Usaid for 19 years. Before joining the India mission as the Deputy Mission Director, Ramona has also served in Ethiopia, Bangladesh, Morocco, and Colombia. Ramona is also a great advocate of inclusive development, and I'm really delighted to invite you to deliver the special remarks. So over to you, Ramona.
Thank you very much, Molly. Appreciate it. And it's a real pleasure to be here. So good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure and a privilege to join you today to really promote a greater understanding of the role of women in reviving the global economy and addressing some climate priorities for a sustainable future for all of us. And I think, as Annapurna mentioned and Vaishali, it's been tough. We have a lot of things to be thankful for, and we have a lot of work to do going forward. And this is a great meeting that brings us all together in order to discuss those things. So the virtual meeting today has been the result of many months of really dedicated efforts between Terry and Savi, the South Asia Women in Energy Program, which is a joint initiative between USAID and USISPF. So to see all of you taking time to attend this event is a recognition of our efforts, the vision, and the hard work, and that we're on the right path and we're addressing the right issues. So thank you all very much for that. I'd just like to highlight that USAID, we consistently highlight that gender equality and women's empowerment are really central to effective and sustainable development outcomes. And for societies to thrive, women and girls must have equitable and safe access to resources such as education, healthcare, capital, energy, technology, land, markets, justice. They must also have equal rights and opportunities as business owners, as peace builders and leaders. And I'm really thankful for the support that I personally have received from various employers, colleagues, and mentors over the years who have helped me in my professional growth and able to bring women together. USAID also strives to strengthen opportunities for women to formally participate in all sectors and at all levels. I think Vishali was talking about the fact that women are often not at the policy and decision-making level in the energy sector or other sectors, and they need to be brought into that. So enhancing opportunities for women is also a key mandate of USAID's Asia Edge initiative. So EDGE stands for Enhancing Development and Growth Through Energy. So since 2018, we've worked to integrate women into industry and address gender concerns. And Asia Edge is an important component of furthering the US vision for free and open Indo-Pacific by improving energy access across South Asia. And gender inclusive development remains essential to reaching these goals. So I'm really glad to share that Savi and Terry, through their partnership, are also highlighting gender inclusive sustainable development. So today's event is another key Savi milestone in advocating a greater gender equality and mainstreaming women's leadership, which are prerequisites for development in any country. So Savi's convenings, these roundtables, the thought leadership, are creating innovative solutions to reduce the energy sector's gender gap, particularly at the senior leadership level. However, as so many of us know, despite the global progress on women's rights and equality, women continue to be underrepresented in the fields of science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, the STEM, representing only slightly more than 35% of the world's graduates in these areas. And a United Nations studies show that women held only 28% of global managerial positions in 2019. And what surprised me when I looked at this is that it's a statistic that has remained unchanged for nearly 25 years. So we've talked a lot, we've done a lot. Have we advanced in all the areas we could? I think we have more to do. Among Fortune 500 corporations, only 7% of chief executive officers were women. And in the energy sector, this representation is even lower. So Savi is going beyond the corporate boardrooms to highlight the issues across the energy supply chain, from enhancing capacities of women in the distribution utilities, to boosting access to clean energy at the grassroots level, to improving health by reducing indoor air pollution, and alleviating poverty through increased income generation opportunities. So the role of women in today's world is crucial, and we're facing critical decisions on what shape our collective future should have. Strengthening women's participation in the workplace will bolster our progress towards reviving the global economy, especially as we recover from COVID-19 and address these priorities for a sustainable future. The same studies on the number of women CEOs in Fortune 500 companies highlight a few other things as well. They highlight that women CEOs drive 3 times the return rates, and that companies with a better diversity are 70% more likely to capture markets, and they're 75% more likely to foster innovative ideas. These are numbers we can all look for and look to improve upon and use for ourselves as we work in these areas. So to continue to ignore these studies and the results, and to deny 1/2 of the global population the opportunity to contribute to global progress will not only be a loss for these companies, but for all of us on a global scale. An example of women's roles that people may not realize is that the first coronavirus case to be found outside of China was in Thailand, and it was discovered by a woman immunologist. Today's discussion is imperative in more ways than just one, coming as it does towards the end of a very, very challenging year, as the other speakers have mentioned, and the threshold of the new, in which together we must tackle hardships and really forge these new opportunities, especially for women. Our event today includes 2 exciting panel discussions in which our experts will share their perspectives on gender inclusive sustainable development and really address gender gaps in the energy sector. So I'm delighted to see leaders from across the sectors join us to work towards strengthening our shared commitment for gender equality. Their experiences are critical to women's empowerment and achieving larger sustainable development across South Asia. I'd like to thank Dr. Ajay Mathur and Dr. Mukesh Aghi for their continued partnership with USAID. A sincere thanks to Dr. Maya Shankar, Deputy Secretary, Ministry of Women and Child Development, and Vishali from Renew Power. Thank you all for your time, your support, and participation in this event. And finally, I congratulate the team at TERI, Savvy, and USISPF for their excellent teamwork and organization, as well as Deloitte, our partner for Greening the Grid Rise, which is providing Savvy with some technical support. So I encourage everyone to take full advantage of the vast expertise available at this webinar and hope that we all of us, use the discussions to drive the necessary change. Thank you very much for this opportunity this evening. Back to you, Manali.
Thank you so much, Ramona. Thanks for the remarks. I would now go back again to Dr. Mukesh Aghi. Dr. Aghi, it would be great if we could have you deliver the special remarks. Dr. Aghi, maybe you could try without the video option to see if your audio is working. We're still having some challenges hearing you, Dr. Aghi. Not very well. It just comes in between and goes. Can I ask the organizers to please sort out the audio issue? And in the meantime, I can invite, yeah, I did get that. Dr. Aghi? Mukesh? Okay, so what I'll do is come back to you again, Mukesh. And in the meantime, I will invite Sri Dayashankar to deliver his remarks. And once again, I'll come back to you, Dr. Aghi. So I'll quickly introduce Sri Dayashankar. Sri Dayashankar ji is working presently as the Deputy Secretary in the Ministry of Women and Child Development. He looks after all the women-related legislation of the ministry and is also responsible for international cooperation, Nari Shakti Puraskar, and many other important schemes of Government of India. We are very fortunate to have you, sir, today. So over to you.
So, thank you, ma'am, for your introduction. And first of all, my warm greetings to the chair, all the delegates, and ladies and gentlemen. It is a growing realization throughout the world that empowering women who represent half of humanity and to provide them equal opportunity to realize their full potential and become equal partners in the growth story has the potential to transform not only the social structure but economic condition of a country. And the same holds good in the context of our country as well. So realizing this, the focus of the government has now shifted from the women development to women-led development. The women empowerment does not mean providing women with a few incentives or financial assistance, but to create an ecosystem that addresses the discrimination and challenges faced by women in day-to-day life, which hinders their growth. Unlike a general belief that equality means making women equal to men, it actually means to provide women, just like men, equal opportunity in all spheres of life to realize their full potential. So this involves a life cycle continuum approach, which takes care of each and every aspect of a woman's life, which inter alia includes ensuring prenatal care, postnatal care, early childhood care, elementary education, higher education including education in STEM, skill development, employment opportunities, safe and secure work environment, safe and secure environment at home and public places, and support and care for elderly, destitute, distressed, and marginalized women as well. I may add that women are disproportionately affected by any natural disaster, including the disaster caused by the climate changes. This is another aspect that needs special attention while formulating policies and technological advancements in relation to climate change. The women and girls need to have freedom in decision making, both within and outside private sphere, with the ability to influence the direction of social change gained through equal opportunity in economic, social, and political spheres of life. Government of India strongly believes that women are equal partners in socio-economic transformation and development of the country. The principles of gender equality is firmly enshrined in the Constitution of India, which also provides for affirmative actions in favor of women and girls. The country also recognizes the importance of mainstreaming of gender-responsive approach in provision of infrastructure, public services, economic empowerment, and social protection. India is also a signatory of a number of UN conventions which regarding elimination of all forms of violence against women and discrimination against women, Beijing Platform for Action, and the endorsement by India, the Sustainable Development Goals, the further changes the course of development by addressing the key challenges such as poverty, inequality, climate change, violence against women, which are critical for success of SDGs. The government of India attaches highest importance to the issues of gender equality, security, and dignity of women, and is committed towards creating an inclusive society where women and girls have equal access to resources and opportunities, enabling them to participate in social, economic, and political development of India. India has consistently held the view that women are key agents for achieving the transformational economic, environmental, and social changes required for sustainable development. Here, the transformational means the root cause of inequality must be addressed and not just the symptoms. The government of India has taken several legislative and schematic interventions for promoting gender equality, women's rights, to enhance the opportunity for their empowerment. The Ministry of Women and Child Development is the nodal ministry of the Government of India on all matters relating to women and children, and the ministry is working towards making a society where empowered women living with dignity and contributing as equal partners in development in an environment free from violence, discrimination, and well-nurtured children with full opportunity for growth and development in a safe and protective environment through interministerial and intersectoral convergence. Government has launched a number of flagship programs like Make in India, Digital India, Swachh Bharat Mission, a Smart City program, Housing for All, infrastructure development, industrial corridors, that have potential to generate productive employment opportunities for women. We all know that in the wake of COVID pandemic, the government of India has taken immediate steps for providing relief for the welfare of women and girls. All the statutory officers under various legislations like the protection officers under the Domestic Violence Act, the dowry prevention officers, child marriage prevention officers, are continue to work around the clock and take care of the rehabilitation and the issues of the women affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. All the women-related helplines were also ensured to be operational for providing assistance to women affected by violence and who are in distress. The government has also launched the Atmanirbhar Bharat Abhiyan, or the Self-Reliant India movement, with 5 recognized pillars of economy, infrastructure, system, vibrant demography, and demand. To cater to the various sections, including migrant laborers, street vendors, people belonging to poor and vulnerable sections, cottage industry, MSMEs, middle class, and the big industries as well. This is aimed at ensuring that these bold reforms across the sectors will drive the country's push towards self-reliant and make our local products global. I hope that the insightful discussions today will lead to a focused outcome that will catalyze the concerted efforts by all the stakeholders towards the common goal of making world a gender equal place where the women become torchbearers and growth and success. I once again express my gratitude and appreciation to Terry for organizing this pre-event for the World Sustainable Development Summit 2021 and giving me the opportunity to participate. At the end, I would like to thank all the participants and the Director General Terry for this wonderful event. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Dayashankarji, for taking us through some of the GOI's efforts. We are really fortunate to have you. Unfortunately, we still have technical issues at Mukesh's end, and we would not be able to hear him. It's our loss, but hope that he will be able to join us in the next event. So with that, I will now move on to our last speaker for the opening session, Dr. Mathur. Dr. Mathur needs no introduction, but quickly, he's the Director General of TERI and a member of the Prime Minister Council on Climate Change. He was also earlier the Director General of BE. And over to you, Dr. Mathur.
Monali, many thanks. Vaishali, it was wonderful to hear you, as it was to hear Ramona and Mr. Dayashankar. And as my colleague of many years, Annapurna, spoke, I just couldn't help reflecting that at the end of the day, gender and its importance comes out in the fact that the important issues of the day are handled by women as much as by men. When we look at the world around us, we are obviously seeing that whether it is towards meeting the 2030 Sustainable Development Goals or more narrowly the climate goals, it is important to bring women into the center of both the identification of issues and of decision making. Why do I say that? Over the past many years, what we have learned, whether it is in renewables or in energy efficiency areas that I have been associated with, is that we tend to leave out the big issues when we do not include the priorities, the concerns of women in development. Let me give you an example. In the recent past, we have been very active in the launch of the Ujjwala program, which is providing LPG gas for a lot of households, particularly rural households, so that they don't burn biomass. This is a recognition of the fact that for years, if not decades, we took it for granted that biomass use is how people like to make food, that it tastes better, etc., etc. We conveniently forgot the number of women who suffer from a range of diseases, including cancer, because of their exposure to the smoke from these chullas. As we roll out the LPG program, it is equally important that we address the issues relating to getting the cylinders. If the cylinder is not available at the doorstep, it means that a man of the house, not a woman, a man of the house goes out and gets the cylinder. The man will prioritize it as and when he wishes. It is important, therefore, that this is taken into account when we are making a decision. It is equally important that the access to reliable gas supply is in place. Because as far as the woman is concerned, if we run out of gas, the normal answer is, well, we'll go back to whatever we were using earlier, which was fuel wood, which was a lot of biomass, which had all of those connotations about the poor air quality. Having a second cylinder in the kitchen makes all the difference. And then you can take a week for the cylinder to be filled and so on, but you are always using LPG, whether you're on or not. I gave these examples to highlight that what is most important is that we mainstream issues related to how people behave, how men behave and how women behave in the decisions that we make. We therefore, in the first session today, will be focusing on inclusive climate priorities. And as you look at these priorities, how do you at the same time also look at promoting gender equitable systems that allow both men and women to reap the full benefit of investments by promoting greater and better informed dialogues, policies, and practice. But this is one part of the picture. The second is, we have also noticed that women are much, much more effective agents of change than are their male counterparts. This, I was surprised to learn, is not a new finding. When the Green Revolution was being launched in India, even at that time, even though the vast numbers of people, quote unquote, who say that they are farmers are men, the agents of change, as far as the Green Revolution was concerned, were women. They were the people who passed on information about the benefits of the Green Revolution from one family to another, from one village to another. We also found this to be true in the promotion of renewable energy, and when we were promoting the Lighting a Billion Lives LABL program, the vast number of entrepreneurs in the solar energy area who we trained were women. They were looking at opportunities through which they could provide services to the community and which did not involve their being away from home household chores for a long period of time. In solar entrepreneurship, we were able to combine the two. It obviously has very, very strong implications as we look to the future and the climate responses of solar energy. We are looking at a future in which solar pumps, for example, would become the mainstay of agriculture. Can we at the same time also look to a future where the agents of change, the people who sell, the people who maintain these, are also women? Very recently, in a program that Terry has launched in the state of Uttarakhand in Mukteshwar, we provide high quality plantation material, herbs, to local farmers. It's the women who grow them. They dry them, we buy it back from them, and then sell oregano or thyme or rosemary or so on. It provides the women with incomes, with cash, and it enables a higher quality of planting material to be provided. The point I would like to focus is that it is important, and this is what we will do in the second session, is that we focus on the role of women as agents of change. It is my experience that clearly this is an area where many of the kinds of interventions that we are looking at in the years to come, particularly those that relate to climate interventions, women are ideally suited to be agents of change. As we discuss these issues, I think we also need to do the next step. And the next step is, how do we make these kinds of things flow into the decisions, not only of governments, but also of corporates, also of NGOs, and also of families. This is not an easy task. Many people point out to the fact that we have had a woman prime minister as a representation of the fact that gender equality has been pursued. I point out it's the only one prime minister has been. We have not repeated that. It takes many people, statistically, it takes many people for one to come to the top. We need a situation in which there are hundreds, thousands, millions of women, both participating in the workforce as well as being agents of change. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mathur. As usual, great to hear you speak. And you very succinctly put what both the panel discussions would be all around. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, that brings us close to the opening session. We now would like to move on to the two panel discussions. I would like to thank all our special guests and dignitaries of the opening session for joining us and sharing their thoughts on this important topic. We will now move on to our first panel discussion, which is on inclusive climate priorities. And before we do so, I would request all the participants who are attending this webinar to please put on your question and answer in the Q&A box so that our moderators can keep a tab on what questions are being asked. And also a request to both the moderators that it would be great if we could keep on the time. So as we have such a great, excellent panel of speakers, it would be great to hear all of them. So with that, I will first introduce our first moderator for our first panel discussion. It's Soma Datta. Soma is a socioeconomist working on the development issues such as energy, access, poverty, and gender. She has been working with policymakers, international organizations, and other stakeholders in Asia and Africa. I'm really delighted to welcome you, Soma, and passing it on to you. Over.
Thank you, Monali. Let me just say that another important bit of my introduction is that I started my career with TERI. So, always TERI. I'm honored to be here and good evening to everyone. It's been a difficult many months for all of us, and I hope everyone's doing well. In this situation, I think when the focus of the government is to build and build back better women, their livelihoods, energy access, resilience, all of this is more important than ever. So in this discussion today, in this panel, we'll be hearing from three leaders, agents of change in the climate change and energy space. But before I call them, let me just share a few contextual highlights, just sort of making the space for what we're going to discuss. So firstly, I want to say that in a very general sense, I think we are at the tipping point, in managing our climate or mismanaging for that matter. And some of the several opportunities that exist today in equalizing the scale are here. The first is the fact is that finally, I think the way we are thinking of renewables is changing. There has been a proliferation of renewables as an attractive and even an economically attractive option in most countries. Going solar is becoming cheaper than the traditional coal-powered plants. Costs are down like never before. This trend is likely to remain. And among other things, I think this is going to provide a great opportunity for women as entrepreneurs, as sellers of these devices, but also as energy services, using energy services for the multiple applications that we couldn't even have thought of a decade ago. The second big trend is mobilization of international climate finance, even though I have to admit it's way below what is required. But what is interesting is that many of these, in fact, most of these, whether it is GCF or any other, are actually giving a far greater attention to gender equality and trying to empower women through a climate change route. Institutions such as Inter-American Bank, etc., are also committing to pay attention to these issues in a very systematic way and making direct interventions in these areas. And also, linking accountability mechanisms to it. So it's not being done on a side, but it's being done in a fairly central manner. And another opportunity I want to point out is that as the countries submit their enhanced or revised NDCs, the climate ambitions are likely to be ramped up. And at the same time, we can expect and hope that there will be greater attention. There's definitely a greater space for gender equality and gender responsive approaches. And these are not just as the traditional standalone separate gender action plans, but in the core climate sectors of energy, of mitigation, adaptation, water, agriculture, transport, urban resilience, and all of that. So with that, we will be talking about the role of women in reviving the global economy while also addressing climate priorities. And I think in this, I must say that recovery of COVID actually gives us a fresh chance to restart and to do things differently. And I think that especially women's entrepreneurship in renewables, women's leaders in the sector could actually be a change to building back better. So with that, let me give space to our panelists. Let me invite Shloka Nath first, our first speaker. Welcome, Shloka. Shloka leads the sustainability policy and advocacy portfolio at Tata Trust, which everyone knows. She also leads the India Climate Collaborative, set up early this year by some of the India's top corporate philanthropies and CSR initiatives. So over to you, Shloka, for your opening remarks.
Thanks so much, Soma. That was such a great introduction. And thank you to Terry for, inviting me to speak here. Thank you to Terry for also just picking up this incredibly important topic today and focusing on it. It's such an important aspect of sort of the climate change challenge, one that we're still figuring out, but it's so great that we can sort of highlight this and really get into some fruitful discussion around it today evening. So I think the first thing that I wanted to point out is obviously that climate change really accelerates existing crises. It exacerbates their impacts, it exposes the underlying structural flaws and inequities. And as we all know, India, of course, is amongst the countries that is going to be the most affected by climate change. And the impacts are going to range from increasing temperatures to crop failures to, of course, a higher incidence of natural disasters. And these challenges are going to unfold through, one-time shocks like the pandemic, or slowly unfolding crises. And they're going to cascade and coincide with impacts like the widespread flooding that we saw in Bihar this year, the cyclone in Odisha, amongst, of course, the pandemic. So you have crises that are essentially interlocking and overlapping. And while climate change affects everyone, social and economic norms that limit women's agency leaves them even more vulnerable to adverse outcomes from natural disasters. So challenges related to water, to diseases, to nutrition, mobility, employment, as well as, of course, natural resource management. So to give you an example, and this is something that I read recently, in the Beed district in Maharashtra, which is drought-stricken, many women migrate to perform backbreaking agricultural labor. And tragically, since the women can't afford to take leave around their menstrual cycles and they have no access to toilets in the fields, a number of women in their early 20s have undergone hysterectomies. And the rate of uterus removal procedures in Beed is 14 times higher than the rest of the state and the country, according to many civil rights organizations. So this is just one of the many heartbreaking stories about the unfolding crisis before us. But at this critical intersection of gender and climate, there is also still so much that we don't know. There are so many issues about which we need to rapidly learn. We have to gather our insights. And so in this very complex space, we have to develop the right questions and frameworks through which we can address the challenges that women and girls face through climate change and the role that they can then play in combating it. We also forget that women are increasingly going to be, tremendous agents for change. So the ICC is exploring a landscaping exercise with Dasra. We're going to look to narrow the scope of study and understand the key subsectors like the impact of climate change on sexual and reproductive health, or how a warming world will raise migration issues for women and adolescent girls. So through discussions, through informational interviews and data collection, we really are hoping to develop a very foundational piece of work that can inform future research, priorities, and actions. Because there is increasing evidence about the broad challenges, but there, as you can imagine, is very little information about these subsectors. So this study is really aimed at understanding the key questions that we need to ask. What is being ignored and what should we be collectively prioritizing while thinking about this intersection of gender and climate? So finally, I also just want to say in my last point that, India and the world really, we do have a very moral, social, and economic imperative, as Dr. Mathur was saying as well, to act with urgency and to direct the right policies, social protections, and strategies so we can help women mitigate and adapt to and build resilience against climate change. It's a very urgent need. So with that, I'll hand it back to you, Soma. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Shloka. That was very nice and very heartbreaking. How do we go beyond this? Anyway, we'll come back to that. Let me just quickly move on to our next speaker, Megan Fillon, Director and CEO, Barefoot College. Barefoot College, of course, needs no introduction, and neither does Megan. She is an entrepreneur and a designer and has been leading the Barefoot College International for many, many years now. And Barefoot College works in a whole lot of countries, over 90 countries in the global South, sorry. And I think now they're also trying to work in Latin America and the Pacific. So I'll hand it over to you, Megan, for your opening remarks. Welcome.
There we go. Thank you so much, Soma, and thank you to the people at TERI for inviting me to share some thoughts with everybody today. Very, very good to see Dr. Mathur, because I'm a big fan of him, and we've had many wonderful debates over the years. I think that I thought maybe today I would talk about a little bit different thing than I normally talk about, because I rarely get the chance to talk about climate in a larger sense, away from just energy. And of course, I have a really deep passion for that subject and feel pretty strongly that the climate movement is not going to succeed without an urgent upsurge in women's leadership. Most importantly, across the global South. And indeed, I feel and have seen in the work I've been doing for the last decade, the absolutely extraordinary both responsibility and opportunity that India has as a voice in leading within the global South. So women and girls are already starting to lead on climate justice areas, addressing climate crisis in ways that heal rather than deepen systemic injustices. Yet far too often, those voices are underrepresented and efforts are inadequately supported. And that doesn't just mean money, it means a seat at the table. And more than having a seat at the table, it's about being given the space at the table to be and to bring your voice as a woman, your perspective as a woman, your sensitivities and sensibilities and insights really fully to the table as we are as women. And I think we're quite a long way from that point. So in this moment, I really feel we need to recognize the wisdom and the leadership, certainly of girls and women, but the financial community, scientific, academic, political, and activist spheres that women all need to be very strongly represented in. In 2019, I was really fortunate to be part of a unique group assembled by the Rockefeller Foundation at Bellagio in Italy, which brought together a group called Connected Women Leaders from civil society, culture, media, philanthropy, business, and government. It was the second time we had met. The first time was around the issue of education. The second time was around climate change and energy access. And that group, under the leadership of Mary Robinson, launched a declaration to advance a climate just future, with key actions described, collectively identified, and committed to in the declaration. And we actively and decisively, as leaders, pledge to use our positions of access, power, and privilege, and to use each other's strengths and networks to support women and girls around the world to step forward, claim their space and leadership within the larger climate movement, and to lift up their voices and stories. And that all women and girls have a place in this work, to unify women's efforts to create equity in health, education, economy, politics, peace, security, and beyond the climate justice movement, human rights, because climate and human rights are inseparable. And lastly, to raise the climate crisis and solutions for consideration in as many institutional settings as possible, including boards, conferences, and forums, of course. Because actually the climate crisis is everyone's issue. And to change an entire system, we really do need everyone. My work in the last decade at Barefoot and my current role in working to create new economic models with the private sector that place people and planet in greater balance has really been grounded on this idea of justice and holding the hands of women and seeing the women in the global south in poor rural communities now across nearly 100 countries. They are our front line in the face of climate, and indeed the only effective means to breaking intergenerational poverty that is so often grounded in energy poverty. So at the end of the day, it's my solar mamas who've been the best teachers and my warriors. They're the women who can't read and write, yet they manage to fabricate a clean lighting system and to serve their communities. But they're also, like all of us, mothers and grandmothers, sisters. They're community activists and caregivers. They're farmers, fishermen, craftspeople, and they're watching their livelihoods and their societies, their children's future, and their own cultural pasts and identities eroded by the effects of climate. So how long will they be able to hold that line without us listening to their voices? So I'm going to leave it there, but to prompt us to try to talk about not only how we as women are going to contribute more, but also how we're going to bring the voices of other women to the table.
Thanks a lot, Megan. I've had the opportunity to meet some of your solar mamas in Sierra Leone and in Bhutan. And yeah, they are some of the most uplifting stories that you can think of. So congratulations. Let me move on to now Anjali. Anjali Garg is a dear friend, and Anjali is an energy specialist at IFC. She is also the India lead for the IFC's Climate Finance Advisory Services. And yeah, right. And she is a program manager for the IFC's Lighting Asia India initiative. Anjali, I will hand it over to you in a moment, but I wanted to also ask you to speak a bit about the business case for engaging women in the sector. If you could cover that as part of your opening remarks, that would be wonderful. Over to you, Anjali.
Sure, thanks. Thanks a lot, Soma, for the introduction. And before I begin, I also want to thank Terry, Savi, and Usaid for putting all these great panels together and for having us on board for this. Just like you, Soma, I also started my career with Terry, so it's very, very nostalgic to be on this event, especially this because I've been part of many what we used to call WSDS at that time when I was at Terry. So big thanks to Terry for organizing this mega event year on year. For my opening remarks, I just, I also want to pick on, what Soma you said in your context setting about, gender becoming so important and critical in all the conversations, whether it is climate fund, whether it is multilateral organizations, everybody's talking about mainstreaming gender in activities. And that's exactly where, my point on the business case becomes important because what we have learned over the years, and we've been working in the space of gender and energy since 2012, at least in India, is that the core issue here is not to talk about it. I mean, talking is important, but if you just keep talking about it, that's not enough. The core issue is to recognize and internalize that this whole approach makes business sense. Till you don't recognize that, it will always continue to be on the periphery. It would be, a good to do and good to show activity within a project. It will remain on the pilot stage and we'll continue to prepare case studies. So you have to really break that barrier, and that can only happen when you truly believe in it and there is a problem, a market failure that you're trying to provide a solution with by mainstreaming gender into it. So for example, that's exactly where our experience comes in play with IFC's Lighting Asia India program, where we introduced with some of our clients building women as entrepreneurs and also solving their issue of not having a good quality solar product so as a customer. But the challenge that we were trying to address here was of last mile availability of product, last mile availability of after sales service agents and entrepreneurs to sell the product. We did not build this whole channel just because we wanted to, but we first identified that there is an issue, and women in the villages and in rural areas provide that last mile connectivity, and they are best placed to provide a solution to this big issue in rural markets. So we went ahead and partnered with like-minded companies who believed in this business model, which includes Frontier Markets and Dharma Life, and I know that Barefoot College is also in the same business model. We went ahead, we partnered with them, but we developed holistic solutions. Again, the second message here is that, piecemeal doesn't really work. So, if you are structuring a solution, it has to be holistic, right from helping them identify who are the right entrepreneurs, which are the right partnerships, how do you train them, and then give them the right support to scale up the business, and then let it scale up. So you don't have to be present throughout the thing, but you have to really prove that this makes for a good business case. That's only when financing will flow. That's when all other partners will come in. In fact, it's really heartening to see that during COVID time, some of these companies were the worst hit, to begin with when the lockdown started. But also they are the ones who really responded quickly, and they have, ultimately played such a critical role in ensuring that the women entrepreneurs on the ground are there to ensure that supply of products is not disrupted. And these are sometimes essential products. Some have started hand wash campaign. Then again, I think Megan would have similar experiences to share. So I think the key message here is that don't do something because it looks good on paper. Do something which makes business sense. There is a business case for it, that is only when it will scale up and financing will start flowing in. Thank you.
Thanks, Anjali. I like this spin that you always give to project effectiveness or effectiveness of increasing the effectiveness. Because at the end of the day, it makes sense. And even in my experience, I've seen even when women have been working with the private sector, it's a very complementary kind of situation that we have. I've seen this in Senegal and several other countries where energy have worked with women entrepreneurs. Anyhow, thank you very much, Anjali. And let me just say firstly that to all the participants or the attendees that you can type your questions in the chat box. That will be the easiest way for us to look at them. And let me circle back to all of you with a quick round of questions. So I will start with Megan. Megan, you've been working with tens of thousands of women all across all continents, I think, probably not Antarctica. But and we know that many of the bottlenecks that women face go well beyond these short-term interventions, technical training included. So what kind of structural changes and institutional interventions are required to address some of those things? Because we are always talking about transformative changes, but how does one do that in the context of, let's say, an energy intervention? Over to you, Megan.
I think one of the things that's such a great question, because of course these are complex challenges, right? And they need complex solutions. And I think we sometimes shy away from complexity. And in this instance, where women are concerned, we can't do that. We have to step up and step into really looking at a 360-degree solution. And often I find those are co-created, both with our donors, but also very much with government. And I'm just back from Africa, so it's extremely fresh in my mind that I spent a couple of weeks working with a recently appointed Minister of Energy and Enterprise on really looking at how we could craft together a national framework that would really dramatically enable women micro-entrepreneurs in the energy space, but also in secondary livelihood. And so I think we're entering a sort of new moment where we have to be open to these different kinds of co-creation. It's not anymore like I'll show up with my model and I'll make my model work on the ground. We have to be able to share the knowledge, the experience, and the successes, and also the failures in understanding how we have to create a systems changing outcome that really is going to be sustainable. My observation is the women, if they're given the support they need, and they're very clear about what they need, and they never ask for more than they need. So those are the learnings, right? It's about trust somehow. Can we trust beneficiaries to really tell us which way to go? And then can we figure out how to co-create the support they need around them?
Thanks, Megan. And we are seeing that to some extent in the global platforms, including those in cooking energy, where countries are actually coming together to form platforms and looking for solutions together. So thanks a lot. who do I go to next? Shloka, let me ask you something. So, Shloka, if I just wanted to ask you, what do you think would be the two major actions or responses that are required at the international scale to bring about the kind of change Megan is talking about, and like actually said, to go beyond pilots?
I think, one of the biggest changes is definitely a narrative sort of framing that we need to shift to, which is, as I said, much of the traditional frame around gender and climate has always focused on women's vulnerability. And I think, Megan did a very clever thing in her opening statement where she talked about sort of the role of female leadership in driving the climate agenda forward. And so the framing is a little similar to that. It is talking about, it is shifting rather from not just focusing on women's vulnerability and their role in adaptation, but increasingly as nature-based solutions, have a growing role to play in both mitigation and building resilience. We do need to shift focus on both these issues, but also how we build policy and institutional capabilities to meet the climate crisis. And within that, how do we incorporate or ensure that women are serving as agents of change? And there are, two really good examples that stand out for me right now, during the pandemic or during the lockdown, that I think just really highlight that point, in terms of how we're going to sort of solve this challenge or how we're going to frame it going forward. So the first was really, women are really key to community resilience when disasters strike. And again, the self-help group movement in India was so key to how communities responded to the pandemic. Right now, we have more than 67 million women in India who are members of 6 million SHGs in over 90% of the districts in this country. And during the early stage of the pandemic, these SHGs, really mobilized to produce face masks. They ran community kitchens. They delivered food supplies. They sensitized their communities as well as combated, misinformation. And what was amazing about it was the decentralization of those actions. They were very contextualized, they addressed local needs, and they filled gaps as well as complemented the state services. So that's a really good model for resilience building and how women can play a very key and integral role in sort of meeting the disasters before us. I think the second quick example is also agricultural resilience. It's just such a key area where women, again, play such a strong role. 40% of women living in rural India work in agriculture, but they're not recognized as a crucial part of the workforce. And they work on smallholder farms. And again, study upon study has found that there's a higher adoption rate of improved sustainable agriculture practices amongst women. Investing in women has been shown to deliver really improved yields. That leads to better household incomes. Which in turn leads to a reduction in deforestation and thereby a reduced vulnerability to risks, both climate and otherwise. So there is that sort of domino effect that takes place. And I would say those for me are very, very strong examples of how we sort of, as I said, need to shift that narrative framing away from just, seeking to protect women, but turning them into agents of change.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks a lot. Coming now a bit from to the national scene, Anjali, I wanted to ask you about what your views are on gender inclusion in the climate change sector in India. What can be done? What are the missed opportunities? But specifically in the context of India, what would you say?
Yeah, thanks, Soma. And just if we look at the overall climate opportunity in India, it's actually more than $3 trillion when it comes to financing over the next 10 years, and it is huge. I mean, it's a really, really large number. And interestingly, a large percentage of it will come from innovations in energy efficiency, climate smart agriculture, green buildings, electric mobilities. So it is not just large renewables as a number of people traditionally kind of understand when we talk about climate. So I think for India, there is, it's a really unique opportunity to set a global precedent that we can choose a greener path and adopt an inclusive approach at the same time. And I think the onus lies on all of us collectively to really push for it and then adapt it because, we are developers, we are policymakers, we are donors, funders, financiers. So, if all of us, really make make this as something which is very important for us going forward, it will happen. So if you go beyond large renewables, and I think that there also the issue is that the contribution that women made to these initiatives and the benefits that they had from them were never really analyzed and documented, right? And I think that's a missed opportunity. But now when you look at what the future holds for India and, all these sectors that I spoke about, they're beginning to open up. There is, a clean state that we start from. So things like, off-grid, sustainable cities, climate smart agri, these are areas where we really need to start consciously talking about bringing women to the forefront. Like Shloka also said, it's not just about protection, it's, making them part of the growth strategy. If I can give a very, very recent example, from IFC in India, we've recently signed an engagement with Awas Finances Limited to work on affordable green housing for low-income borrowers who have little or no access to income. And we've included women in that initiative. So, looking at women borrowers for green affordable housing is part of that whole initiative. And we've consciously taken the decision that we want to adopt this approach. We realize that, the barriers to women's access to housing finance are insufficient income and traditional gender norm. So we're trying to, break that, establish a baseline with Awas, look at the women portfolio, build again the business case and business projection. So again, look at it from a business lens. And this would be the first of its kind initiative where you're bringing affordable housing, but adopting a green and inclusive approach. So if probably, in large initiatives or small initiatives that all of us are looking at, if we start applying an inclusive lens, as I call it, and, the climate approach or a green approach, I truly believe that there is a lot that we can achieve. And maybe after 10 years, when we discuss this topic, the thing that we will be talking about will be very different from what we are talking about today. So that's where I think we can head to, but yes, it will really need a very conscious approach to get there.
Amen to that one. So, we have just a few moments more. Are there any questions from the audience? I had seen a raised hand, but it's gone now. Okay, maybe not all very clear interventions. Let me just, I don't think I can summarize the rich information that came in, but what I did catch definitely is something about changing the narrative completely from, this is not to say that their needs are not important, but definitely making them center stage, co-creation of solutions, localized solutions. I really liked what Shloka said about, the breed example and recognize the differentiation, women's participation, voice at the table, but being at the table and also representation, their wisdom, all of these need to be taken into account. And at the end of the day, all of this is going to happen if you're able to actually make a business case for it, which is that it makes sense in any interventions, that the climate change will be handled better if we have women. Renewable energy will be handled better if we have women. But at the end of the day, I think women must have a place at the table in the clean energy transition and COVID recovery as well. And I think the leaders that we heard from are, what shall I say, shining example of that. With that, I can end the session on time. But before I do so, can I request all the panelists to please turn on their videos? I was asked to do that.
Soma, we did capture all of you.
Not required?
All of you, no, not required. We
All
got
right.
all of you, beautiful ladies. Yes, totally.
Okay, in that case, let me thank Shloka, Megan, and also Anjali and for the session, and of course, Manali and the organizers, and hand it back to Manali. Over to you.
Thank you, Soma.
Thank you so much, Soma, and thanks to our panel members, Anjali, Shloka, and Megan. Great to hear from all of you. Really enjoyed the discussion, and I'm also looking forward to the next one, which our moderator, Gauri Johar, will be taking on. So quickly to introduce Gauri. Gauri is the Executive Director in IHS Markets Energy Consulting, covering the Asia and Middle East markets. Gauri's primary focus is is conceptualizing and leading the delivery of energy consulting projects in India related to energy policy, development, energy transition, and so on. So I'm really delighted to welcome you, Gauri, and handing it over to you.
Thank you so much, Monali. Thanks to Terry, US-India Strategic Partnership Forum, Usaid, and Savi to have IHS Markit and me here representing IHS Markit. I think, this topic has been such a great conversation starter. You're going to have, WSDS, the World Sustainable Development Summit in February, as you had mentioned earlier. And to really have women on the rise, redefining our common future as the conversation starts, just shows that how inclusive and diverse, you have made the conversation. And I really congratulate you and all the organizers on that. I think our earlier panel and, Vaishali, Dr. Mathur really set this context very well in terms of, where we need to go from in terms of the dialogue. And whichever way you look at it, I think diversity, inclusion is a very evergreen subject, actually, which has just gained a lot more prominence and awareness recently in keeping up with, I think, the demanding and uncertain times. And I do believe that this awareness has reached a certain tipping point. There has been a stickiness in organizations which shows up in, the numbers that Ramona had mentioned earlier. There is an unconscious bias. I think that unconscious bias really points out to the fact that we've always done it that a certain way, and that way needs to change. And that's when we start working in a situation where we've always done it that way approach, thinking comes in. That's when organizations are shutting themselves to real solutions, new solutions, innovative solutions. And to be effective, India's energy transition needs to be inclusive and diverse. Dr. Mathur talked about women as agents of change, focused on the Ujjwala scheme. And I think it's really interesting to note that, schemes like Ujjwala, what we don't realize is that it's given back, for instance, 4 hours in a day back to women to do other things, possibly to be educated more. Vaishali brought to the fore something that is not talked about enough in the context of women and women in energy, that, there has been some conversation about women having borne the brunt of even the pandemic. And, Ramona had shared some of the statistics on this, that though women make up about 50% of the world's working age population, they're still underrepresented, especially in key decision-making roles of the workforce, as there are leakages in the workforce, as the funnel narrows on the top of the house, and to the result that only 20% of the boards of Fortune 500 companies, I think Ramona had mentioned 7% of the S&P 500 CEOs are actually women. So, and I think what was discussed later in the earlier panel with Soma and Anjali was about how diversity is good for business. Studies have shown that gender diverse companies actually offer higher returns with possibly lower volatility. So I think, the case of good business and inclusive business going together is very strong. And one study which comes to my mind is that McKinsey estimates that women, if working at their full potential, could add up to about $28 trillion to annual global GDP by 2025. And again, Ramona talked about reviving the global economy in this post-pandemic world. So that's certainly something which, we are here to work on as inclusive organizations, as inclusive leaders. And I'm delighted actually to welcome our panelists here who lead, who are at the top of their roles in their organizations. They've been the agents of change, and they have actually walked the talk. They've lived many business lives, and I will go into those details. But I think one common thread amongst their entire background is that they really espouse the cause for gender diversity and inclusion. So let me first welcome Jill Ivanko, who's the president and CEO of Chart Industries. Jill has been serving in this capacity since June of 2018. But I think she's not let the pandemic, stop her in her stride. She has been named the 2020 World LNG Executive of the Year. She's also been named the ExxonMobil Power Play Award winner in the Rainmaker category. And she's really leading a lot of innovation in LNG virtual pipelines and also in bringing LNG by rail. So it's interesting how she manages all these different roles. So I'd like to invite Jill first for her comments on this panel before moving to Mr. Mohandas Pai and Dr. Shalini Sareen. Jill, over to you.
Well, thank you, Gauri. What a year this has been, and while challenging, it's also brought discussion to the forefront around the progress that you've heard about today towards sustainable development goals and how women can play a key and greater part in the climate change discourse. So as we're experiencing a heightened focus on sustainability globally, even more so as the world responds to the global pandemic, it gives us the chance to really have a very candid conversation about women's roles in reviving the economy as well. I think of this in two parts. First, what can we do as companies around the globe to support progress? And second, what can we as individuals, regardless of gender, do to help ourselves and each other in this big undertaking? So first, as companies. At Chart, we're a global industrial manufacturing company, and we're very proud to have 900 team members in Southeast Asia, 140 of which are women. So still not to the right metric that certainly we would want to see. We do manufacturing in Tree City, India, and have IT, finance, and engineering roles in Hyderabad. But this number, to give you a sense, is far greater than only a few years ago. Sustainability is growing as a career, and women hold a majority of sustainability executive roles in large companies. And I think that's really because, as women, we share a passion for change and a desire to make people's lives better through their businesses. At Chart, we have many upcoming engineers that are females, and we've tried to create space for diverse and perhaps less traditional roles, and we think that's really important for companies to do. By creating the space, we also create the ability to demonstrate how successful women can be in leadership roles. Let me share one example from our own business. There was a preconceived cultural view in one of our largest Southeast Asian manufacturing facilities that a female could not, or perhaps should not, run a business. Earlier this year in April, so right at the beginning of the global pandemic, we decided we would promote a very high-performing female to run one of our largest sites there. And she has led the team to a much more positive and what I would say is open-minded atmosphere. And in turn, because of demonstrating this, other women in the business have stepped forward to take on new opportunities, including one entering our executive leadership program, one as the head of finance in that same facility, and one as the head of HR in that same facility. So now we have this all-female, all-star team in that location, and they're going to have a record year for the company, which is another example of what Ramona stated earlier. Statistics prove returns are strong from women leaders. But also I'd frame this in what Megan said on the last panel in her first answer, that women are very clear with what is needed. And this is a very important attribute as a leader for an organization, to know where to prioritize and get everybody onto the same page. So now stepping back to the second piece here, the personal side, what can each of you do to help? When we hire, we look for the most capable person for the job, regardless of gender. In many cases, the most capable brings a different perspective to well-established industries, and this is where I see the opportunities for women to make a significant difference. In order to do this, though, we need to remove those preconceived notions or perspectives on how a culture will respond to women in leadership roles. As I've found as a leader in mostly male-dominated industry, nearly all of my colleagues that are men are actually eager to hear another viewpoint and have respect for what I bring to various discussions. But sometimes it requires you as a woman to take the first step in reaching out to your male colleagues. And in order to have more women involved, we need to create those spaces, as I commented earlier, where it's okay to have responsibilities within and outside of work. And as I like to say to women when I talk to younger women in their careers, you can have both. You can be a mom, you can be an executive. It's not mutually exclusive. I have a 7-year-old myself. So that leads me to my commentary about confidence. How do we foster confidence in women making a difference in this discourse? Some of the examples I already gave support exactly that, and today's discussion is another great example. So thanks to Terry, Sawi, and USISPF for generating this critical dialogue, and I think we need to do that more and more. I'd also comment that this climate change and gender influence is a global issue. And I don't believe, and I don't think it should be solved on a country by country basis. I think is important that we do this globally. And as an American company with locations around the world, we want to be involved in these conversations and move progress forward, not in a particular region, but really as a global initiative. So to conclude my comments, in many cases, sustainable development goals are simply referred to as only climate change or energy, when in reality, they touch water scarcity, clean water, and even clean food, all of which are interlinked, just like the discussion of women in leadership is interlinked with solving these critical global challenges. So thanks, Gloria. Looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you so much, Jill, for setting the stage on how you see from an international lens in the LNG business and how you've given some examples of really walk that talk in Southeast Asia in your business operations and more women into the engineering function, for instance. I'd like to now move, I'd like to request Mr. Mohandas Pai and Dr. Shalini Sareen from this panel to please switch on your cameras even when other panelists are speaking. And I'd like to now invite Mr. Mohandas Pai, who is, it's a real honor to have you, sir, on this panel as well. You're a pioneer in the fields of information technology and education. You're the chairman of Manipal Global. Mr. Pai joined Infosys in 1994, served on its board from May 2000 onwards. He was the CFO for about 14 years and was instrumental in transforming Infosys into one of the world's most respected and widely known software service companies. And then you stepped down in 2006 voluntarily and led efforts in the areas of human resources, education, and research, and have really been a pioneer on supporting gender diversity, some of the largest programs like midday meal programs, and also bringing a real focus into bringing gender front and center in the business world. So welcome, Mr. Pai. I'd like to invite you to share your opening remarks.
Gauri, we are having some trouble with Mr. Pai's audio and video. So could you maybe have Shalini speak, who's also having video challenges, and then come to Mr. Pai?
Okay, no problem. Okay, Shalini, hello, welcome to our panel here. Shalini Sareen, Dr. Shalini Sareen is the co-founder and executive director of the Electro Mobilitat, and her experience ranges from being the chief people officer to the head of corporate social responsibility to being a business leader for the base of the pyramid solar lighting business and for social impact. At Savi, she leads the mentorship group. And fascinating to note that profit with purpose is her mantra and belief. She's also worked internationally across Europe and the US and is currently based in India. Over to you, Shalini, for your remarks on this subject of diversity and inclusion and sustainability.
Thank you, Gauri, and apologies. I think I'm facing some technical issues and therefore not really visible through my camera. And I hope you can hear me well, though.
Yes, I can hear you well, and I hope everybody else can hear you well as well.
Great, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, so I think I'm going to be sharing my experience through the last 3 decades of corporate experience and now more as an entrepreneur and as an educator. And then thank you very much, Terry, Dr. Mathur. Sorry? You can hear me? Thank you, everybody, for organizing this. And I've been listening to all the previous speakers. The only question that comes to my mind is, why do we have this conference or such similar conferences on gender inclusion? One of the reasons is that we need to understand and acknowledge that it's an issue. We've been talking about it, like Anjali said, for a long, long time, but we'll continue to talk about it and, see this as a nice to do rather than, really move the needle unless there is traction in some of the activities when they are implemented on the ground, and there is a holistic solution supporting the ecosystem. For example, and I'm going to give you an example from EV. I worked prior to this in access to energy, and I've worked with Megan and Anjali and Dharma Life and Frontier Markets, and the scenario was very different, where the self-help groups, like Shloka also mentioned, have a very significant role to play, and also in agri. But in mobility, I still see that there is a lot to be done for women. For example, we are working, and Shell Foundation is very actively working on this Vahini program, where we are trying to get women e-rickshaw drivers and creating an support structure for them to get the e-rickshaws, a charging station, and whatever else that requires to put this together to make the business model viable. But the moment the pandemic hit, the biggest casualty were these because of the fear of the infection, and since they are the ones during the lockdown managing the household, taking their primary role of looking after the house, the caretakers, more seriously, it is very, very difficult for us to even get those women entrepreneurs despite all the infrastructure being created. So yes, women are very resilient, and they have been at the center stage for finding solutions for many of the problems in the energy space, whether it is the cook stoves or the lanterns, but we still have a long way to go in all the other sectors. And especially because the working conditions in the industrial sector, traditional sector, the fossil fuel, were not very easy. They were traditionally remote locations, difficult locations, drill sites, plants with lack of facilities for women. We were not able to really see the needle move. And now with renewable, we have more hope. With the electronics, with digital transformation, this really opens up opportunities for women. But more than the working conditions, we really need to do more on the mindset shift and have an open dialogue and commitment to change, to implement these initiatives and promote participation in these sectors, not only at the organization level, but also at a societal and individual level, for us to really see. So at the onset, I would say that yes, we need the infrastructure, the safety, security. I mean, we have been talking about the gender issue, but we still, on the other hand, miss the safety and the security of women, where we keep seeing even our capital as the rape capital of the world. So, a lot still needs to be done in terms of the basic infrastructure and transport if we want to see the needle move. And I think mobility sector is one of the very important sectors as well, which will bring fairness and gender balance. So, Gauri, I'll answer the questions later, and this is just some of my opening remarks.
Thank you so much, Shalini. And I think, what you talk about mindset change is so important, that, we can have any number of programs, any number of targets. But if we do not have mindsets change, it is very difficult to really reach the outcomes we want. And as Anjali had said before, we may still be here 10 years later talking about this subject and not something else. So I do see that Mr. Pai is on. Welcome, Mr. Pai. Can you please turn your camera on?
Again, Mr. Pai is having challenges with the video, but his audio is working.
Oh, his audio is working. Hello, Mr. Pai. Can I just hear you? That I just want to make sure I can hear you. Can you hear me?
I think let's give it a minute for him. Let's give it a minute for him.
Sure. Let's do that. Yeah. Ripu, if you could just signal to me when he's on and when he's able to tune in.
We see him on as an attendee, but it seems like it's having a trouble with the audio or video.
Okay.
Maybe
He's unmuted at our end. He's unmuted at our end.
Maybe what we can do is you can pose questions to Jill, and in the meantime, Jill and Shalini, and in the meantime, we'll try to resolve this.
Sure. We can. I think that's a great plan. So, Jill, back to you. Given that you've had a lot of leadership roles in different organizations, you've been you've been at the position of implementation of different programs in your company across different regions. And I think what's great is you've been recognized for that, not just within your company, but also, within the larger community this year, especially with the 2 awards that you got. So can you share with us, what barriers, you're an icon of full participation in leadership roles, right? What barriers hinder women's full participation in leadership roles? And also, what new forms of leadership do you think are essential to unlock the kind of transformational changes which are needed to move the dial?
And I think I'll approach this answer with some of the reasons and perceived reasons that women, while we make up half of the world's talent pool, we're certainly only holding less than 20% of leadership roles, and the statistics are even less when you start going into region by region. And many companies, to this point, I would say, just aren't or haven't been ready to hire women into the top executive positions, and that's even more pronounced when you get into percentage of female CEOs. In my opening comments, I made the point of don't let anyone tell you that you can't have both, meaning that you can't have a family and have a successful career. It does take sacrifice, but it also takes companies that are willing to attract and develop women into leadership roles, and that's a company-wide change. So there's many different things that can be done to address this, things like flexibility in managing work and personal lives. So I think while the COVID pandemic kind of put us in a position where we let people work from home and have some more flexibility, it actually didn't work out the way that it would in a typical situation, because you'd have the circumstances where women had even more responsibility while being at home, teaching their children and managing work. We also deal with breaking down kind of what I would consider gendered career paths. And that goes more to traditionally women in mid or more senior management stay in typically historically female roles such as HR and marketing and communications. So how do you consciously as a company create career paths or avenues to move females into other opportunities? You hear throughout the discussions diversity and inclusion initiatives, and while I think it can actually become more of a token comment or a token activity if you put some real thought behind D&I activities and thinking about how do you utilize this more heightened focus on D&I to actually consciously include folks that previously wouldn't. And that's something that, again, it's a company culture change that has to happen. And this is a transformation that has to happen. This isn't something that in my mind is going to happen overnight. Successful transformation change really requires leaders to shape the culture. And that's something that, has to, from our case, focuses on customers and innovation, but it doesn't really boil down to generalizations about male or female traits. So our belief is, giving people an opportunity regardless of gender is important to making decisions through their own belief system and the lens of who they are. So we look at leadership effectiveness based on traits versus based on gender, based on competencies and skills, not necessarily, again, gender conceptions. But it goes back to my opening comments of you've got to, as a company and as a person, create the space to give people opportunity. And then you go into that level of how do I handle competency, skills, traits, have these diverse perspectives come into play as an organization. So we're pretty excited about that we've promoted into leadership roles. And we see it as a domino effect, where if you see successful females in this discussion, more are going to be confident to enter that conversation. And then, as leaders, participating in this type of discussion and then following up and responding is probably the number one way we've been able to open doors for people, and that's both men and women. So I'd encourage everybody, on this particular discussion, like reach out to me via LinkedIn or via email, which I'm happy to share that, because it's my personal commitment to respond to everybody who reaches out to me. If you take the time to talk to me, I want to take the time to talk to you. And we've just been extremely successful in finding individuals that have talent that we otherwise wouldn't. So I'd encourage everyone to reach out for opportunities. And at Chart, we're making that space and would welcome anyone on this call to reach out to me.
Well, thank you so much, Jill. I think you struck a great balance between having the competencies, but also developing the culture in the organization to bring about, gender inclusion, sensitivity, and at least not exclusion. So I think you do bring about a great point about the focus on competency, but then having the right space to enable better outcomes. I'd like to go back to Shalini. Shalini, I think Jill's comment on cultural change is very related to the point you talked about changes in mindset. So Shalini, I do see that you are on the boards of several companies and you have you have the ability to influence in more ways than one. What more can be done, in your opinion, to overcome this sort of gender blindness and address these persistent barriers to gain that equality and sustainability promise, especially when the numbers we shared before, which we have right now for S&P 500, Fortune 500 companies, as Jill also mentioned before, when you start going through the regions, the numbers are much worse. So how do we overcome this gender blindness, maybe this unconscious bias?
Thank you, Gauri. And therefore, I'm not going to really spend time on the research, which already shares that our ability to innovate goes higher, return on equity goes higher, profitability increases, and et al. So, couple of things I think we really need to focus on, and first and foremost is how do we increase the pool? I've been an HR person for over 3 decades before I became an entrepreneur in clean energy. And I've often heard leaders and managers come back and complain, we are not able to get the right women. We do not have the right skill set. And it is therefore extremely important for us to increase the pool that we dip on. And like Jill mentioned, that at birth, typically the gender ratio is pretty much balanced. We are 50% of the talent pool in this world. And at school or primary education, the number falls down already a little bit, especially in India. And then at a formal entry level, and I'm saying formal paid workplace, the ratio falls even further. And especially in India, it falls to a very, very small percentage, which is less than a quarter. By Catalyst, which is the research. And therefore, and we are seeing that the working age population is expected to grow over 800 million in India by 2050, which is a population of 1.3 billion, which is a large number, 800 million, will just be the working population about 15 years. So despite all of this, the numbers and the participation rate is so low. That means there has to be policies and participation to improve the education, the skill set. I'm against the quota system, but for creating a level playing field, we will have to get the women out into the workforce. And due to the pandemic, we are seeing more rural women leaving India's workforce faster than the urban workforce, which is back a few years. So it's going to take double the effort. And this all requires a lot of infrastructure facilities. Again, I'm repeating the transport, the creche facilities, access to endowments, information, health, education, social protection for every girl child. And not only education, but I think even sports facilities for them to be able to get the confidence to be out there. And the upbringing, the exposure that we provide, the quality of education, and in letter and in spirit. And we'll have to have a carrot and stick approach for villages, for panchayats, for sarpanch, at every local authority responsible for implementing a high level policy framework which is rolled out from the center. So I think it's extremely important that we focus also on education, on skilling, not only to be able to create better jobs, but also to help create women entrepreneurs. And some states like Gujarat have done very well in creating these MSMEs amongst women, where they are able to get not only the access to finance, but also remove the barriers to access finance and ownership and control over assets, which is extremely important. So therefore, financial inclusion becomes the next topic, which becomes extremely important. And despite the fact that women inherit equally from their parents, our social fabric and stigma around that is so huge that women shy away from what is legally, rightfully theirs. And my last point, Gauri, is that unless we have women in decision making, unless we have women in power, the needle is difficult to move. We need women in politics, in administration, at a gram panchayat, at a village panchayat, sarpanch, zilla parishad, IAS, bureaucracy, state and central government, and of course on boards. And that's when we will be able to move the needle.
Wonderful. Thank you, Shalini, for giving us those key critical pillars to focus on. And welcome, Mr. Pai, to the panel. We're glad that you've been, that your connection is fine. I hope you can hear me fine. Is it clear? Sorry, I think you're on mute. I'm sorry, I cannot hear. Can anyone else hear Mr. Pai? I'm not able to hear him.
I can't either, Gauri.
Yeah.
Okay.
The video seems to be working now, but
Your video is working fine, Mr. Pai, but we can't hear you.
Maybe try without the headphones. Maybe try without the headphones.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yes, perfect.
Great.
Wonderful.
Yeah, Gauri, tell me, Gauri.
Great, wonderful. Well, Mr. Pai, you don't need any introduction. We did still give you an introduction as a pioneer in the fields of information technology and education. Wonderful to have you here. we have have a time challenge here. So given that you come from the information technology side, you have actually done so much in the field of gender diversity. And I'm glad we've kept this panel diverse by having you. So otherwise it would have been an all panel. So what kind of platforms, maybe especially from an soft come hard infrastructure side, do you think we need to be created to link diverse groups of practitioners, policymakers from different regions, sectors to promote women in leadership sectors? And if you can share some examples of work you've already done.
Okay, Gauri, let me first start by giving you some data. I think it's very important to have data. I really think we should have a report on the state of women in India, so all of us are on the same page. In school, there are more girls than boys today as per the latest data. In college last year, more women joined college than men. And 3 years from now, we'll have more women graduating than men in terms of the gross enrollment rate. In many states, we have more women graduates than men already. In the southern states, we have an enormous amount of women. Now, between the South India and North India, in North India, we're getting a lot of women graduating. There are no jobs. That's why the women participation in the workforce has come down. In South India, there are enormous amount of jobs, and I think women are participating in an extremely big way. Now, if you look at the corporate sector, 17% of India's boards are women. 17%, women make up 17% of India's board members. That I think is very good news. They make up 10% of India's CEOs. Now, in the IT industry, what I know is there's 40% of the incoming batch is women. When you go to the middle layer, about maybe 30% are women today. If you go to the top layer, the C-suite and 2 levels below, there are 10% women already. And this has happened in a very big way. And in Infosys, we had a problem when I was there about 11 years ago as the director for HR. We found that only 55% of women came back after they had a child. So we put in place some policies, interesting policies, and they were very nice. What we said is, when you have a baby, we're going to have you a mentor for you so you can understand when to come, and you can get your confidence back. Second, we'll give you up to 2 years leave without pay. We'll get some leave with pay for maybe 4 months or 3 months so you can keep your job. And third, we'll create a work from home or work from other offices for you. So immediately in 2 years, women coming back went up to 85%. This just shows, like Shalini said, women require special facilities to come back. Now, talking about a platform, first we have to create a report called the State of Women in India so everybody's on the same page. Second, we have to create a technology platform and events where opinion makers, regulators, and others come together to understand issues about women and take some policy decisions. To give an example, the Securities and Exchange Board of India came out with a norm that every board should have 1 woman at least. We asked for independent board members, but they said women. Very soon we found that most of the women are family members. Then we went back to them and told them we want an independent women member. They agreed, the law has been changed. Now we have 17% women members in the board and is working remarkably well. Now, if you look at senior members in the IT industry, the boards are having increasing number of women. Women are coming back to the senior position. And now many tech companies are starting a move to get back women to the workforce after they left. They've gone through childbearing, they've raised their children, and they're free. Because remember, once children start going to school, we almost become empty nesters, right? There's nobody at home. So they're starting a special program. And in the technology industry, the startup industry, we are seeing a large number of women come in. And women are remarkable in software. They do a very, very good job. They're extremely focused and they're highly talented. And now special programs have been started to train women in new technologies. So the platform that we must create is a platform where regulators, government, and others come together and they can discuss together with forum like yours or whatever forum like the USIF, and we can sit down together and understand all the issues. We also need some legislative change because even though industry is doing many things, women are slightly disadvantaged. And the disadvantage comes because, it's still a male-dominated society, and the legislative change has worked. And by focusing on diversity and focusing on inclusion, we are getting much more exposure to women. And lastly, Gauri, we need to celebrate the success of women. For example, Kiran Mazumdar-Shaw, India's greatest woman entrepreneur. She's all over the place. She's talking in public. She's on TV. She's everywhere. We need to showcase women. We need more and more women. Nivruti Rai from Intel. Now she's taken the lead in making sure she creates a woman forum in technology, and that is working very well. So showcasing women, showing them as a heroes in society. I'm not saying the word heroine. Hero as a neutral term in society. Celebrating the success, giving out information, having a state of the women in India report every single year to make sure. And we should not focus on negative things. There could be negative things. Let us celebrate the successes. Let us make it much, much bigger. And you must understand the young girls who come in the workforce today. In our office, we have maybe 50% women in our funds. They do a remarkable job. I can't say who is better, the men or women. Both are doing extremely well. You just have to give them the space, encourage them, mentor them, and they'll do extremely well.
Thank you so much, Mr. Pai. I think you made some fabulous points on, first we need to understand the data. We need to start about what is the status. And then from there, we create the right platforms. We create certain programs. And thanks for sharing what you all did in Infosys, because that, as you said, helped women come back so that there's less leakage between middle and senior layers of workforce participation. So I think, this has been a fabulous panel where, all of you are top in your fields, you're recognized leaders, you're icons. And, when icons like yourself, and as you mentioned, Kiran Mazumdar-Shaw, are showcased as the success stories which young women and men can aspire to become, I think that's where we need to be. And that's when, we may not need to have this conversation 10 years from now. I think I'll just end. We've not been able to take any audience questions, but there was one question which I thought was very pertinent. And I'll end on that as a food for thought for all of us here and whoever's listening in, that when we talk about empowering women to take on leadership roles, is it really possible without simultaneously sensitizing men towards equal participation at home and work, so that it actually is all that we talk about happens at home actually. So it happens. So thank you so much, Terry, USISPF, Savi, and Usaid for having this panel. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Gauri, and great to have you, Mr. Pai. You brought the diversity, and we are ending on a very optimistic note, and I'm so happy to hear you.
Monali, I want to tell you one thing. This decade is the decade of the Indian women. Indian women are going to dominate. They're going to change India. India is going to become a much, much more compassionate, better society with more women in leadership. It's happening already. I see it happening, and it's so wonderful. For example, in Bangalore, we got something like the Bangalore Political Action Committee, headed by Kiran Mazumdar-Shaw. I'm the vice president, and it's headed by Revati Ashok, who is the CEO. And all the women are working to bring in civic activists, train people, change the city of Bangalore. It's remarkable what women can do. I'm very, very optimistic, very enthusiastic, and I think this is a decade of the Indian woman. We're going to see wonders.
Touch wood to that. Thank you so much, Mr. Pai. And I will now pass it on to Nalti for the last part of our event, the most important one, the concluding remarks. So Nalti, quickly to introduce you, Nalti serves as the Senior Vice President of Government Affairs and the Head of Energy, Manufacturing, Environment and Infrastructure at the USISPF. In this leadership position, he leads the policy teams and executes strategies for companies in India and the US. So over to you, Nalti.
Manali, and on behalf of the USISPF, I want to also thank our partners at Terry, Sawi, and USAID for organizing this important program with us. We stand committed to promoting gender inclusion and sustainable development, and look forward to supporting Terry's World Sustainable Development Summit. I know we're running short on time, so in closing, I also want to thank our panelists for participating today and commend them for the amazing work they're doing. I hope you all stay safe and healthy during these challenging times, and I look forward to seeing you all soon. This concludes my remarks, and I believe the program. I hope you all take care. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nalti, and thank you, everybody, ladies and gentlemen, experts, participants, Distinguished guests, moderators, thank you for joining us today. We look forward to hosting another round during the WSDS and having more conversation around this very important topic. So once again, thank you for joining us. Thanks to Terry, USISPF, and my colleagues at GTG RISE for organizing this, putting the whole event together. So thanks and good night from our end.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Gauri. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Great show. Thank you. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.